On a bright summer afternoon along the sunlit Cumberland River, everything seemed peaceful. Kids laughing, joggers passing by, sunlight glittering on the water like scattered gold. No one expected anything unusual. But that calm shattered the moment a massive police German shepherd named Rex froze mid-stride, his ears snapping forward, his muscles tightening as if the river itself had whispered a warning. People stopped to watch as Rex lunged toward the water's edge, barking with a frantic urgency no one had ever heard from him. At first, officers thought he had spotted a drowning animal or debris drifting downstream. But when they followed his gaze, their stomachs dropped. A blue suitcase was floating toward the rocks, unmoving, sealed, and strangely heavy against the current. Rex began clawing at the shoreline, barking, whining, pulling so hard the leash burned in Officer Mark's hand. "What's wrong with him?" someone whispered. "And why is he acting like something's alive in there?" Rex wouldn't back away. He wouldn't even blink. He knew something no one else under that blazing summer sun understood. He wasn't just alerting. He was warning them. What happened when they pulled that suitcase from the water shocked the entire city. Before we begin, make sure to hit like and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Our stories reach farther than we ever dreamed. Nashville in midsummer always felt like it was dipped in molten sunlight. The heat didn't just sit in the air. It pressed down, thick and shimmering, rising from the streets and bouncing off the tall glass buildings that lined the banks of the Cumberland River. Cicadas buzzed in the trees, boats hummed lazily downstream, and the riverside park pulsed with life. Children chased each other through the grass. Joggers moved steadily along the trail despite the heat, and families picnicked under patches of shade that barely softened the glare. Even the river itself sparkled too brightly, as if the sun insisted on touching every inch of water. Officer Mark Bennett walked along the waterfront path with the familiar weight of duty on his shoulders. He was a solidly built man in his mid-30s, with weathered tan skin, dark stubble along his jaw, and tired hazel eyes that came from too many long shifts and too many cases that clung to him afterward. His hair was kept short out of practicality, though strands often curled when he sweated. Mark carried himself with a steadiness that made people trust him, broad-shouldered, alert, someone shaped by years of responsibility. He wasn't the loud, commanding type. Instead, he was patient, observant, and known among the department for having an instinct that rarely failed him. But even his instincts could never compare to the four-legged partner trotting by his side. Rex, his police K-9 partner, was a 5-year-old German shepherd with a thick sable coat that gleamed gold and black under the scorching sun. His posture was always perfect, back straight, ears pricked, stride confident. But beneath that discipline was an extraordinary sensitivity. He could detect fear, illness, danger, and sorrow long before any human caught on. Rex had been trained for search and rescue and for protection, but what made him exceptional wasn't the training. It was his intuition, the quiet intelligence shimmering behind his amber eyes. Children loved waving at him, and though he seldom broke focus, his tail would sometimes give a single polite wag as acknowledgement. Beside Mark walked Officer Jenna Harper, a young woman in her late 20s. Jenna was tall and lean with fair skin, freckles scattered over her nose, and reddish-blonde hair tied into a messy bun that escaped in wisps around her cheeks. She had a sharp wit that balanced Mark's quietness and a fierce sense of justice shaped by losing her brother in a hit-and-run when she was 16. Since then, she had never tolerated injustice, not from criminals, not from colleagues, not from herself. Despite the heat, she walked fast, arms swinging, her expression alert beneath her sunglasses. They were talking about routine patrol schedules, when Rex suddenly halted so abruptly that the leash jerked tight in Mark's hand. His muscles bunched, ears snapped forward, and his nose lifted to the warm breeze drifting across the water. Mark felt the shift immediately. Rex didn't behave this way unless something was wrong. "What is it, boy?" Mark murmured. Before he could finish, Rex pulled hard toward the riverbank, claws digging into the grass. Mark and Jenna exchanged a look, instinctive, tense, then followed him through the scattered picnickers and families lounging by the water. A few joggers slowed, side-eyeing the sudden urgency. At the edge of the river, caught in the branches of a half-submerged tree limb, something bright blue bobbed against the current. At first glance, it looked like litter, an abandoned travel case, cheap, weather-worn. A few people nearby dismissed it with a shrug. After all, things floated downriver all the time. But Rex didn't shrug it off. He let out a low, throaty growl that made a couple sitting on the grass immediately stand up and move back. "It's just a suitcase," Jenna said under her breath, though she didn't sound convinced. Mark narrowed his eyes. Rex doesn't growl for just anything. Within minutes, a small rescue boat was called in. The operator, a lanky older man named Tom, with sunburned arms and a gray mustache, maneuvered the boat expertly and hooked the blue suitcase, dragging it slowly to the bank. Tom had worked river rescue for 30 years. He knew debris, and he knew when something felt off. His brow furrowed as he hoisted the suitcase ashore. It was heavy, too heavy for something filled with clothes or junk. And despite the sun beating down, the suitcase felt strangely cold. The moment the case touched the grass, Rex lunged at it. His bark exploded so loudly that children nearby jumped. He circled the suitcase, tail rigid, chest heaving, claws scraping against the plastic shell. Then he began clawing aggressively at the lock. Wild scratching, frantic, desperate. It wasn't aggression. It was alarm. Jenna felt her stomach tighten. She had only seen Rex react like this once, during a collapsed building search when he sensed a trapped survivor beneath rubble no one believed was alive. "Mark," she whispered. "I know." A faint sound, so small it could have been imagination, thumped from inside the case. Jenna stiffened. "Did you hear that?" Mark nodded, throat tight. "Call it in. We're opening it." A small crowd formed, shielding their eyes from the glare, sensing something was terribly wrong. Tom stepped back. Jenna pulled out her multi-tool. Mark steadied the suitcase while Rex growled, trembling with urgency. The lock clicked. The lid sprang open. Mark and Jenna leaned in, and their faces drained of color. But what lay inside remained unseen to everyone else. The lid of the suitcase had barely risen before the summer sun illuminated what lay inside. A tiny form curled beneath a soft pink blanket. The afternoon light, harsh and bright on the riverside grass, made every detail sharpen painfully. Mark's breath caught as he reached in, lifting the edge of the blanket to reveal a little girl no older than 2. Her skin was pale in a way that didn't belong to a child. It had the faint bluish undertone of someone deprived of warmth for too long. Wisps of curly light brown hair clung to her damp forehead, and her small lips were cracked and dry, her breathing shallow and uneven. Around her wrists and ankles were the unmistakable purple rings of restraint marks, faded but still clear. The sight made a woman nearby gasp and cover her mouth. A boy eating melting vanilla ice cream dropped his cone and burst into tears as his mother pulled him into her arms, shielding him from the scene. Jenna's face drained of color. "Oh God, Mark, she's barely breathing." Before Mark could respond, Rex pushed past him, planting his front paws on the grass beside the suitcase. The German shepherd leaned in, letting out a series of soft, trembling whimpers. He gently touched his nose to the back of the child's hand, nudging her with delicate insistence as if urging her to wake. But the girl did not open her eyes. She gave only a faint exhale, her chest rising with effort. "Call EMS now!" Mark barked, his voice tight with urgency. Officer Jenna fumbled for her radio, summoning paramedics with a tone that left no room for delay. A handful of bystanders stepped back, forming a loose circle of horrified silence around the officers. A middle-aged man named David Rowe, a retired mechanic with a stout build, oil-rough hands, and a weathered baseball cap, stepped forward and said shakily, "I ain't never seen a kid look like that before. Someone did something real bad." David's voice carried the rasp of a man who had smoked for 30 years, to bury the memory of a car accident he once survived, but a close friend did not. An event that made him fiercely sensitive to suffering, especially in children. Minutes later, the ambulance pulled up with a sharp screech. The bright afternoon sun glinted harshly off its metallic sides. 2 paramedics rushed out. Lisa Cameron, a petite woman in her mid-30s with dark curly hair tied into a tight bun, freckles dotting her warm brown skin, quick-eyed and steady-handed from a decade of emergency work. And Trevor Cole, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s with a neatly trimmed beard and calm blue eyes. The kind of man who moved with quiet confidence because he had seen enough chaos to know panic never helped. Trevor gave Rex a quick glance. Not fear, but recognition of a working dog's alert. They worked fast. Lisa slipped an oxygen mask over the child's tiny face, adjusting it gently, her voice low and soothing despite the urgency. Trevor started an IV line, with practiced skill, infusing warm fluids to counter the girl's dehydration. "Pulse is thready," he muttered. "Temperature's too low. She's been cold for a long time." Rex refused to step away. When they lifted the girl onto the stretcher, he followed so closely that Trevor had to shift sideways to avoid stepping on him. A tense laugh flickered across Lisa's face. "Looks like he's coming with us." Mark tried to pull Rex back by the harness, but the dog planted his paws firmly, growling, not in threat, but in raw distress. "All right," Mark sighed. "Let him ride along. He's part of the reason she's still alive." Inside the ambulance, sunlight streamed through the back windows, casting bars of golden light across the girl's still form. Rex sat pressed against Mark's leg, eyes fixed on the child, as if guarding her life through sheer will. When the ambulance turned into the hospital bay, Rex whined, a low, aching sound. Inside the brightly lit pediatric emergency room, nurses moved quickly. Machines beeped. Warm blankets were layered over the girl, and a pediatric specialist entered. Dr. Samuel Hayes, a tall, slender man in his early 50s with graying hair at the temples, deep-set brown eyes, and a demeanor shaped by 30 years of treating children. He was calm but firm, the kind of doctor who could quiet a room simply by speaking gently. His hands were long and graceful, always steady, hands shaped by his vow never to lose a patient to preventable causes after his own daughter died from a rare infection 15 years earlier. The loss aged him overnight, but it also forged a compassion in him that patients felt immediately. He studied the little girl with a tightening jaw. "She's malnourished, dehydrated, very weak." His voice carried more worry than he intended. 10 minutes later, a fragile movement stirred beneath the blankets. The girl's fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. Rex immediately perked up, ears forward, tail rigid. "Easy, Rex," Mark murmured. The girl blinked weakly, her eyes cloudy with confusion as she scanned the room. Then her gaze landed on Rex, on the enormous German shepherd sitting like a sentry at her bedside. Her lips parted. A faint whisper escaped. "Doggy." The word struck the room like a soft miracle. Even Dr. Hayes exhaled in relief. Mark stepped beside her bed, keeping his voice low and gentle. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" She swallowed, her voice barely a rasp. "Mommy. Where's Mommy?" The room fell silent. Nurses exchanged troubled glances. Rex rested his chin on the edge of her bed, whining softly. At that moment, Dr. Hayes re-entered with a clipboard in hand. His expression darkened with something heavy. He approached Mark slowly. "Officer Bennett, this is about her condition. There's something you need to know immediately." But before he could continue, the chapter ends. The summer afternoon settled over Nashville like a warm sheet of gold. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the police station lobby, casting long bars of brightness across the tiled floor. The heat outside was relentless, but inside the air felt sharp and chilled, made even colder when the glass doors burst open and a young woman staggered in. Emily Parker looked like she'd been running for miles. She was in her late 20s, petite, with long chestnut brown hair that fell messily over her shoulders, strands clinging to her tear-stained cheeks. Her skin was pale, almost sallow from 3 days without real sleep. She clutched a small, crumpled photograph in trembling fingers, a picture of a smiling toddler with curly hair and bright eyes. Emily's blue eyes were puffy and red, her breath ragged, her hands shaking so violently that Officer Jenna had to steady her by the arm. Emily's voice broke in half as she tried to speak. "Please, please tell me the little girl you found by the river. Is she—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Mark stepped forward, Rex at his side. The dog's ears perked at the sound of her distress. Mark's stern face softened. "Ma'am, let's sit down. Tell us everything from the beginning." Emily nodded and sank into the nearest chair, pressing both palms over her mouth as if trying to hold herself together. After a long, trembling breath, she finally spoke. "Her name is Lily. She's 2. She showed them the photo. Mark recognized the child instantly, the same small face he'd seen hours before in the hospital bed. Emily explained what happened in a rush of fragmented breaths. 3 days earlier, she had taken Lily to the West Ridge shopping mall. The mall had been packed. School vacation, summer heat, crowds everywhere. Emily described herself as a careful, attentive mother, but she'd made the fatal mistake of looking at a clothing rack for just a moment. "I turned around," she whispered, voice cracking, "and she was gone." When mall security pulled the footage, they saw a woman, a stranger, lifting Lily into her arms, cradling her like a mother would, walking calmly through the doors. Nobody questioned her. Nobody stopped her. "I screamed for help," Emily said, cheeks trembling. "I called her name until I lost my voice." The next morning, she received the video. A distorted female voice, disguised, cold. "She does not belong to you. Report this, and you will never see her again." Those words had haunted her like a noose tightening around her lungs. "I was afraid to go to the police," Emily sobbed. "What if she hurt my baby? What if Lily was crying for me?" She covered her face again, shaking uncontrollably. Jenna placed a gentle hand on her back. "You did what you thought would keep her alive." Emily nodded weakly, though guilt still twisted her features. "This morning, I saw the news. A little girl found near the river, a suitcase." Her voice collapsed. I prayed it was her, that she was still alive." Mark exchanged a silent glance with Jenna, then said softly, "We found her. She's alive. Weak, but alive." Emily gasped, a sound so full of relief and agony that Rex whined softly and pressed his head against her knee. Emily reached down and stroked the dog's fur with shaking fingers. You found her, didn't you?" Rex's quiet rumble was all the confirmation she needed. Minutes later, Mark and Jenna escorted Emily to the pediatric wing. Sunlight streamed through the windows there too, but it felt warm, gentle, hopeful. When Emily stepped into Lily's room and saw her daughter lying beneath the blankets, tiny, frail, but breathing, her knees buckled. She rushed forward, gathering Lily into her arms with a soft cry that was part joy, part heartbreak. Rex lay at the foot of the bed, his head resting on his front paws, watching the reunion with solemn eyes. The warm light cast a golden halo around the small family, but beneath that beauty, a shadow was forming. After Emily had calmed enough to speak, the officers gently asked about her family. Had anyone ever shown unusual interest in the child? Anyone unstable? Anyone who had reasons to resent Emily? Emily stiffened. She hesitated. Then she whispered a name. "Rebecca." Mark and Jenna exchanged glances. Emily swallowed hard, tears forming again. "Rebecca Mills, my older sister. We haven't spoken in months. She's troubled. She's always struggled with her mind. She wanted custody of Lily once." Jenna frowned. "On what grounds?" "She said I couldn't care for her, that Lily was better off with someone stronger, but the court denied her. They said she was emotionally unstable." Emily wrung her hands. "She hated me after that. She said I stole the only family she had left." The officers stepped out to check the internal database. Within minutes, a file appeared on the big screen in the conference room. A grainy photo of Rebecca Mills. She was in her early 30s, with wild dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that revealed far too much intensity. Her record included mental health evaluations, erratic behavior, and a restraining order filed 5 months earlier. She had vanished 6 months ago. "If she took Lily," Jenna murmured, "this wasn't random. This was possession. Obsession." Officer Daniel Brooks, tall, square-jawed, with dark skin, thick eyebrows, and a calm, deep voice shaped by years as a crisis negotiator, leaned forward. He was a man of patience, molded by growing up with a father who'd been a violent alcoholic. Daniel had vowed never to mirror that anger, and now he handled the department's most delicate cases. His tone was steady. "We need to find her before she tries something again." Just then, Mark's phone buzzed sharply against the table. He glanced at the screen. "The technical team," he answered, and the voice on the other end spoke fast. "Officer Bennett, we pulled traffic camera footage from the bridge above the river where you found the suitcase. You need to see this right away." A pause. "And tell Rex. He might recognize the scent." Mark looked down at Rex, who was already standing, ears sharp, as if he knew exactly what was coming. The chapter ends here. The next morning arrived with a brightness so sharp it hurt to look at the sky. Nashville's summer sun rose early and merciless, turning the Cumberland River into a sheet of blinding silver. The bridge above the water shimmered like molten glass, every steel beam glowing in the heat. Birds skimmed the surface of the river, joggers filled the paths, and the world looked deceptively peaceful, as if nothing dark had happened the day before. But the investigation team felt the tension beneath that sunshine like a taut wire. Mark stood beneath the bridge with Jenna, Daniel, and a forensic technician named Elliot Crane, a thin man in his early 40s with sandy blonde hair, cropped short, and cheeks dusted with stubble. Elliot had the gaunt look of someone who rarely slept, partly from the job, partly from his personality. He was meticulous to the point of obsession, the kind of man who didn't believe in luck or coincidence, only evidence. His pale green eyes studied everything with a sharpness that made strangers uneasy, but his colleagues respected his unwavering precision. Elliot held a sealed evidence bag containing a torn scrap of fabric found inside the suitcase. Mark crouched beside Rex, who stood rigid, ears forward. "All right, boy," Mark murmured, unclipping the small scent pad and holding it in front of Rex's nose. "Find her." The German shepherd inhaled, muscles rippling beneath his sable coat. His amber eyes sharpened with focus. And then, without hesitation, he surged forward. The leash tightened, and Mark hurried to keep pace. They moved quickly along the sunny trails that wound beside the riverbank. Cyclists sped by, parents pushed strollers, and couples walked hand in hand, unaware that a predator's trail snaked through their peaceful morning. Rex pulled them into the park, weaving between oak trees that cast patchy shadows on the grass. Children's laughter drifted on the breeze, creating a disturbing contrast to the grimness of their mission. Jenna wiped sweat from her brow. "I hate how normal everything looks," she muttered. Daniel nodded, his deep voice steady despite the heat. "That's how these people hide, in plain sight." They followed Rex as he guided them farther from the city center. The sun climbed higher, pressing down like a physical weight. Rex's pace never faltered, until he stopped abruptly near a cluster of abandoned warehouses by the river. The buildings were old, their brick walls cracked, paint peeling in long strips. Sunlight spilled through broken windows, turning the dusty interior into a bright, eerie glow. Rex let out a sharp, rising whine before dropping into a low growl, staring at a rusted metal door streaked with reddish-brown rust. The hair on his back bristled. Mark exchanged a look with Daniel. "This is it." Elliot, sweating through his pale dress shirt, approached the door with latex gloves and a flashlight. "Broken latch," he noted. "Looks like someone forced it, recently." They entered cautiously. The warehouse was filled with harsh beams of sunlight cutting through the dust, slicing the space into bright corridors. The air smelled faintly of mildew and old wood. Then they saw the signs. A half-empty water bottle, a length of frayed rope, a discarded juice box, a small child's sock, a plastic toy horse with one ear missing. Jenna's voice cracked slightly. She was here. Lily was definitely here. Elliot crouched down, inspecting the items carefully, his hands steady. "Timeline fits. These haven't been here long. Whoever brought her kept watch from that window." He pointed to a large opening overlooking the very stretch of river where the suitcase had been discovered. Daniel's jaw tightened. "She stood here and watched the bag drift away." Mark swallowed hard. He imagined Rebecca's silhouette leaning forward, eyes burning with twisted logic as she set the suitcase adrift, believing she was doing something justified. Just then, they heard footsteps crunching outside. A neighbor approached, a kindly older woman named Marjorie Fields, in her late 60s, with curly gray hair piled loosely on her head and soft brown skin weathered gently by the sun. She wore a floral summer dress and carried a small grocery bag. Her warm smile faded when she saw the officers, replaced by a worried wrinkle across her brow. "I thought I should tell someone," she said, voice gentle but nervous. "A few days ago, I saw a woman hanging around these warehouses, tall, thin, wearing a baseball cap pulled low, dark hair. She kept staring out at the river. Gave me a bad feeling." She hesitated. "She drove a silver pickup truck. Pretty old model. Beat-up bumper." Jenna exhaled sharply. "Fits Rebecca's general description." Daniel's radio crackled. A dispatcher's voice burst through the static. "Be advised, traffic cameras just picked up a silver pickup heading north along the river road. License plate partially matches the one associated with Rebecca Mills. Sun's hitting the plate. Read is clear." Mark looked at Rex, whose tail was stiff, eyes burning with purpose. "You ready, boy?" Rex barked once, a sharp, decisive sound. The team sprinted out of the warehouse. Sirens wailed seconds later, blending with buzzing cicadas and the roar of summer wind. Patrol cars peeled away from the lot, tires kicking up dust, lights flashing brilliantly in the sunlight. Rex stood in the back seat of Mark's cruiser, paws braced against the window, ears pinned forward. The chase led them alongside the glittering riverbank, through a corridor of glaring brightness. From a high vantage point, a traffic drone camera, the scene looked almost surreal. The police cruiser racing along the sunlit road, and ahead of them, a battered silver pickup turning sharply down a narrow dirt path leading toward an empty riverfront clearing. And there, standing beside the truck, back turned to the camera, motionless under the punishing summer sun, was Rebecca. The chapter ends here. The late afternoon sun poured over the empty riverside clearing like molten copper, baking the earth beneath it. Heat shimmered in waves off the dusty ground, and not even the breeze rolling off the Cumberland River could soften the glare. There was no shade, no shadows for secrets to hide in. Everything was exposed under the relentless summer sky, including the figure standing beside the battered silver pickup truck. Rebecca Mills stood frozen in the sunlight, her shoulders rising and falling with shallow, erratic breaths. She was in her early 30s, but looked older now, worn down by months of obsession. Tall and angular, she had dark, shoulder-length hair that hung in tangled ropes around her gaunt face. Her pale skin was flushed by the heat, and her sharp cheekbones cast long shadows across her hollow cheeks. She clutched a crumpled photograph of Lily in one trembling hand, gripping it so tightly that the paper had begun to tear. And her eyes, red, swollen, wild, darted toward the river and back toward the approaching police cars as though she were trapped between fight and flight. Mark stepped out of the cruiser first, the sunlight casting a golden sheen across his uniform. His jaw tightened as he took in Rebecca's frantic posture. Jenna flanked him, one hand resting on her holster, sweat beading along her freckled temple. Daniel approached on the other side, his calm, deep voice trying to diffuse the tension before it boiled over. Rex emerged last, his sable and gold coat gleaming under the sun, his amber eyes locked onto Rebecca with unwavering focus. He stood tall beside Mark, chest broad, ears tilted forward in restrained alertness. A low growl rumbled from deep within his chest, controlled but unmistakable, the sound of a protector ready to act. Rebecca snapped the moment she saw Rex. She lifted the picture in the air, shaking it at them. She's mine, she shrieked, her voice raw and broken. Lily belongs with me. Emily was never good enough. She never deserved her. Her words cracked like glass, splintered by jealousy, desperation, and delusion. Rebecca, Daniel said carefully, stepping slightly forward, palms raised in a calming gesture. Put the picture down. Let's talk. No one wants this to end badly. No, she screamed. You don't understand. I was supposed to raise her. I was supposed to save her. Tears streaked down her cheeks, mixing with sweat as she backed toward the driver's side door. Emily took everything from me. Mark saw her glance at the truck, a twitch of the eyes, but enough for him to know she was about to run. Before he could shout a command, Rebecca lunged for the door handle, fingers brushing the metal. Rex moved before any human could react. A streak of muscle and instinct. He shot forward like a bolt of lightning, planting himself directly in front of the truck's grill. His bark exploded across the clearing, deep, fierce, commanding. Rebecca froze mid-motion, startled by the sudden wall of fur and power blocking her escape. Her hand slipped from the door handle. That split second was all Mark needed. He closed the distance in a blur, slamming his shoulder into her, twisting her arm behind her back. Rebecca screamed, struggling wildly, but her exhaustion and her shock made her movements sloppy. The metallic snap of handcuffs echoed through the clearing. Daniel moved in to assist, steady but firm. Rebecca sagged in defeat, the photograph falling from her hands and fluttering to the sunlit dirt. Mark lifted it gently. It didn't have to be this way, he said quietly. She didn't answer. The scene shifted quickly after the arrest. Sirens faded, the sun dipped lower, and soon the setting changed entirely. Inside the hospital, sunlight filtered through the windows in rich amber hues, painting everything with a warm, hopeful glow. Lily sat propped up in her small hospital bed, wrapped in a fresh blanket. Her curls framed her round cheeks as she giggled softly, pressing her face into Emily's shoulder. Emily, her chestnut hair pulled into a loose bun, her expression exhausted yet radiant, held her daughter tightly, as if afraid the world might try to steal her again. Rex stood at the side of the bed, tail thumping gently, his head bowed as Lily wrapped one tiny arm around his neck. Her laugh, breathy and sweet, rang like a small bell. Dr. Samuel Hayes entered the room, his tall, slender frame softened by the golden light. His deep-set brown eyes held a rare smile. "She's recovering beautifully," he said. "A full recovery is expected. She just needs rest and care." Emily's tears fell freely. "Thank you, all of you." Then she pulled out a folded slip of paper, worn at the edges, marked with scribbled crayon lines. "Lily wanted you to have this." Mark opened it. In wobbly handwriting, "Tell the dog he's my hero." His throat tightened. He crouched beside Rex and whispered, "Hear that, buddy? You're her hero." Rex nudged his hand, eyes soft, tail sweeping slowly across the floor. Night fell over Nashville, but the hospital glowed brightly, a beacon in the darkness. Mark walked down the corridor with Rex at his heels, both of them tired, but whole. Months later, on a brilliant summer afternoon, the Riverside Park was alive with laughter. The sun lit the water in dazzling waves. Lily, now healthier, stronger, wearing a pink summer jacket, ran across the grass, squealing with joy. And Rex, older but just as steadfast, trotted protectively beside her, like a gentle giant. Emily sat on a wooden bench watching them, tears glinting in the sunlight. But this time, they were tears of peace. The camera of their quiet life pulled back slowly, capturing the small family beneath the golden sky and the loyal police dog who had saved them. Sometimes, miracles come from a dog's nose and a heart that refuses to give up. The story ends here. In the end, this story reminds us that miracles don't always arrive with thunder or angels in the sky. Sometimes God sends His grace in quieter forms: a loyal dog's instinct, a mother's unbroken love, a stranger's courage to act. And in our everyday lives, perhaps we pass by these small blessings without even noticing them. But when we open our hearts, we see His hand everywhere, guiding, protecting, and lighting the path we didn't know we needed. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the unseen miracles that God places in our world. May the Lord bless you, protect your family, and keep you under His grace, today, tomorrow, and always.